Boom, 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 boo-doo-doo, boo-doo-doo, boo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. We live, baby. Let's go. Share to Twitter. Tweet, 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 tweet. Share, copy, take it over to Instagram right quick / Facebook because it uploads simultaneously, which is beautiful. What's going down, baby? It's your boy, That Guy Mile High. Tune back in for another one of them live reactions, baby. If you didn't join the members live, you missed out. Go make sure you become a member, and so you don't miss out on none of that member stuff. But anyways, back to this regular schedule programming. Let's go. Oh man, you like how I played off that stutter? You know what I'm saying? That was good shit. I ain't gonna lie. That was solid. That was solid work right there. Even with the stutter, that was solid work. What up? What up? We got Bear Gibson, Amanda, Trey, Nugget. What's going down? Yeah, my power went out for like literally like that. It was like pew, pew, and then it was just long enough to like make my damn internet go out. So my internet had to reboot. It was rebooting. My bad. I gotta use this lotion bottle to hold my phone up. There we go. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You gotta keep it schmoovin' and grooving. But shout out to everybody out there, man. I just want to say big shout outs to all of the members of the channel. Shout out to everybody who's just subscribed. I do appreciate everybody. But, you know, we got to talk about the members. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're not a member, you should become one. One of the things that we're going to start doing now is actually going to the thing right here where you can see all the members. So we got Lynn, Token, Taylor, Mad Creeker, Jane, Liz, Misty, Nugget, Ryan Parks, Mad Hood, and Gary. Whole lot of gang shit. You guys see their total time that they've been in their thing, doing their thing. Shout out to all the members, you know what I'm saying? Because we want to just go ahead and make acknowledgement. And this is something that we're going to start doing now for all the members, is letting you guys get acknowledged for being members. And I appreciate y'all for that. So, yeah, let's go ahead, jump out of there, get back into this regular scheduled programming. Why is this screen so big? Hold on. Why is my window like giant? It makes no sense. Hold on. There we go. Fixed. But yeah, let's do this. Now it's time to roll up. We did add 2 more memberships. We added 2 more. So we have an even cheaper one now. They just have to be approved. I don't know if you press member. If you hit join now, it may only still have the one membership option up, because we just added 2 more memberships, and YouTube has to go through their whole, you know, approval situation. So they've got to review it and then approve it or whatever. But there's going to be a $2.99 option now. So basically all the stuff that you were getting as a member before today, you were going to have, hey, shout out to Nugget. Why did I say 1 month? I don't know. Did you only been a member for 1 month? Oh no, it says you've been a member for 2 months. I don't know, bro. It might not have just updated. You might have been a member for like right on the cusp of 2 months, so it just might not have updated all the way through all the analytics and everything. Don't stress it. I know you've been here for a hot minute, brother. But yeah, so we're gonna have a $2.99 option. $2.99, bro. We dropped it down a whole nother like $2 for y'all. You know what I'm saying? For anybody who wants to join, there will be a $2.99 option. Just give it a couple days. If it's not there now, just give it a couple days so that it can refresh, and you know YouTube can do its YouTube thing. So there'll be a $2.99, a $4.99, and a $9.99. So everybody who's a $4.99 level member, you are now called a really high member. So everybody who will be $2.99 will be high members. $4.99 will be really high members. $9.99 will be the highest members. Okay, just playing off of my own name. Thought it was cool. Thought it was fun. You know, we all kind of we had a good time with that. So yeah, you know what I'm saying. $2.99 high member, $4.99 really high member, $9.99 is the highest member. And basically what you'll get with that will be a few different things. I can actually show you guys that real fast before we jump into this video, since we're talking about it, because I think it's super important for you guys to know. I don't care if y'all see that shit. It's, you know, I ain't making millions of dollars by any means. But look, so here we go. So here's the high members. You guys can see it now up on your screen. So we got the loyalty badges. This is the high members. We're gonna just break down the $2.99. You'll get the high members. You'll get loyalty badges, which basically the colors will change as you've been a member. So like the longer you're a member, the further down the color scale you'll get till you're all the way at the red. Which if you're at red, it means that you've been a member for 24 months or longer. So yeah, so the colors just represent the amount of time that you've been a member. So like there's a few people like Gary and Ryan Parks are two of them that are both in this pink. They're a pink little badge right here because they've been members for over a year. So yeah, so you'll get loyalty badges on your names like Mad Creeker. Shout out to Mad Creeker, Token, Nugget. They're all members of the channel. That's why they have, you know, this colors on the names and the badges and all that shit. You'll have access to special emojis, and I wanted to add 3 more emojis as we went up, but I found out there's actually an emoji cap, so I have to get 4 more members to unlock the ability to upload 4 more emojis. I can do 1 more emoji for you guys, but in order to add more emojis, I have to actually have more members, ironically enough. So yeah, but then so the $2.99, you'll be a part of all the member shout outs on the videos and lives that we do. You'll be a part of the members only streams, or you'll have access to members only streams. Like we just did right before this live, we were on a members only stream. And then kind of like Patreon, but we're keeping it all on YouTube, Amanda. We're keeping it all on YouTube. And this time we're making it more realistic and feasible. And by keeping it all on YouTube, it's a lot easier to manage. And then also the high members will get photos and status updates. So basically just a super basic package. It's $2.99. Then we got the really high members, which you'll get all of the stuff from the high members. You'll also get discounts on merchandise now. If you're a really high member, you'll get 15% off. I'll be creating the discount codes for that to either tonight or tomorrow. But you'll get 15% off of all merchandise throughout the year. And then you'll also get the at cost plug. All right. So 4 times a year, I'm going to give you guys the ability to pick 4 different items, whatever you want, and we'll make it for you and sell it to you at cost. Okay? You want a t-shirt? Cool. No retail on that shirt. At cost. Okay? You could do that 4 times a year, once every 3 months. So once a quarter. That's how we got 4. Every 3 months, you can get an at cost item from www.thatguymilehigh.com. Gang. And then any other time that you want stuff, you'll get a discount. You'll just get discounted rates on everything regardless. And then if you're the highest member at $9.99, you get everything from high members. You'll get everything from really high members. But then we also, instead of getting the 15% off for the highest members, you'll get 20% off of all merchandise at thatguymilehigh.com. You'll get 20% off on all your purchases throughout the year. You'll also get the at cost plug, obviously, because that's included because of the really high member status. And then for the highest members, we're also going to give you 2 free items a year, 2 gifts a year. You know what I'm saying? They'll be random. It'll just be random gifts that we'll just randomly send out to you twice a year. You know what I'm saying? We'll probably pick like a time halfway through the year and then like the end of the year or something, where you'll just randomly get something dope showing up to your fucking house. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you know, don't be surprised if I hit people up and I'm like, yo, bro, I need your Addy. You know what I'm saying? I need the Addy so I can go ahead and, send you something dope. So these are the new memberships, man. These are the new memberships. Like I said, we just updated this. So there's some of them will not be, 2 of them, the really high or the high members, the $2.99 one, and then the highest member one. Because we changed the $4.99 one to really high members. It's the medium package now. So we added 2 more levels that YouTube has to approve once they approve, they will be up and ready for everybody. If you like the $4.99, go ahead and just do what you got to do and get that $4.99 package. You know what I'm saying? Become a really high member. Really cool perks. Like I said, there'll be some more emojis being added on as we continue to grow. We'll be adding, hopefully more just cool shit. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. And Token, you can upgrade as soon as it updates. I'm sure it probably hasn't fully updated yet, so I would check back like tomorrow, maybe even the day after that. And then when you go to your join or come to the channel, it should give you the option to like manage your subscription basically, and then you can change your subscription up or down or however you want to do it. So that's enough of that, guys. I appreciate you letting me just get that out and spiel it and all that bullshit, so that you guys can just know what we were doing on live before this with the members, because ultimately this was built with me for the members, by the members, so that we can hold on one second, gang. YouTube live. Yeah, so I just wanted to inform you guys so that anybody who was curious about it or anything like that was up to date. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump out of this now. Let's get into why we're really here. Let's go ahead, roll up, spark up, spark up, dab up, vape up, dip up, moonshot it up, sweet tea up, do what you gotta do, just go up, maybe take a shot or 2 or 3 because it comes with me. If you can't do none of that, open your mind, because ultimately that's the only way to go up. Anyway, I just messed that all up at the end. I stumbled on myself. Anyways, let's go. MrBallen, feral people hunt teen hiker. Sounds wild. But let's go. Smash that
In
like
2008,
button, all that
a
shit.
teenager was hiking through a very dense forest in Northern California when he decided to stop and make camp for the night. He walked several hundred feet off the...
Hold up. Did he just start this off with, there was a teenager who decided to go hiking by himself through the woods? By himself? Like, come on, bro. Like, I like to go camping. I ain't gonna lie. I like to go camping. But I'm not going hiking and camping through the woods by myself, bruh. You know what I'm saying? Like, I went hiking with my kids, I had all 3 of my kids, the dog and everything. We went hiking. But I was like, it was like right out of town. Like, I live, like, we didn't go into the mountains, like, little trail. It wasn't even, you couldn't even really call it hiking. You know what I'm saying? We went trail walking. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not that crazy.
Trail into the forest, where he found a small clearing, and there he would set up his tent.
That's wild,
and he would
bro.
climb inside
What up,
and
Adam?
go to sleep. A few hours later,
Bobby,
he would wake
Bear,
up
everybody,
because he thought he
shout out to
heard
everybody up in
something
there,
outside of his tent. But there were no windows on his tent, and it was totally pitch black outside, so he can't see anything. And so he's just laying there listening, trying to discern what's going on outside. And as he's laying there, he hears it again. And it's the sound of footsteps slowly approaching his tent. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please hide a Bluetooth speaker in the like button's bedroom, and then proceed to play Siberian Husky screaming audio at full volume all night long. Also,
yeah,
please
right
subscribe
there. You
to our
gotta have
channel
at
and turn
least
on
2
all
people with you
notifications
when
so
you're
you don't
going
miss
into
any of our
some
weekly
mountain
uploads.
type shit.
Okay, let's get
You know what
into
I'm saying?
today's story.
I mean, at least one in a dog. Okay, if you don't have 2 extra people could come, at least bring 1 person and a dog. You know what I'm saying? That dog can suffice as that shit. The dog's probably more useful than the other person, honestly. Just being real. The following story is based on an unverified first-hand account by a Reddit user. Their name has been changed. So we don't know if this is 100% true. We don't know I doubt there's even any sort of like evidence to really support this other than the fact that it's a first-hand encounter. So we'll take everything we see and hear with a grain of salt on this one. And I guess at the end of this, we'll kind of ultimately just decide if we believe the story that this Reddit user told, or if we think this shit is cap-a-roni. You dig what I'm saying? Okay, let's go. What up, Kayla?
In 2007,
What
the
up,
now
Ryan?
famous cult classic movie, Into the Wild, was released to movie theaters for the first time.
Stay
The
strapped to
movie,
get
which is
capped.
based on a true story, centers on the life of a young man named Christopher McCandless. In 1990, Christopher graduated from a really good school with honors, and by all accounts, he could have gone on to get a really good, high-paying job, but Christopher didn't want a job. He wanted freedom. And so without telling his parents, because they would not have been happy about this idea, he gave away all of his possessions, he gave all his money to charity, and he headed off to Alaska to live off the grid
What?
by himself. He eventually would find this rusted out old city bus in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, and he would make this bus his shelter, and he would live inside of this bus for 113 days before he unfortunately died of starvation. While Christopher's story is obviously tragic,
Bruh. Did he just say he successfully lived in this bus in the Alaska wilderness for 100 and whatever odd days, and then he died of starvation, basically? Bro, that don't sound like a successful living in shit. That sounds like he was struggling for 180 some odd days until his body said, bruh, I'm done. And he just, that was it. That don't sound successful at all. Like, that
the
sounds
movie
like
about his life, Into the
a
Wild,
very
really
hard,
focuses on Christopher's
terrible ending.
unrelenting spirit and
Will
his
do. I'm rolling up one
constant
right now.
drive towards getting the thing
up,
he
Mike?
wants the most, which is freedom. And so at the end of this movie, the audience is left feeling not sad, but inspired. Inspired to
Oh,
take
that was
big
the end of
risks
a-
in
that was a
life and
movie,
seek
okay.
out adventure before it's too late. One audience member who was
That don't sound
totally
inspiring.
inspired
That
by
shit sound
Christopher
depressing as
McCandless's life
shit.
story.
How the bruh, if you found inspiration from that, from a dude being like, I'm gonna sell everything, I'm gonna give all my money away, and I'm gonna go to the fucking Alaskan wilderness and just hope that I find something. Oh, I stumbled across the bus that's been abandoned. I'm going to make it my shelter, and I'm going to try to live here forever and live this fantastic life. But then in reality, all you did was basically have a long 180-day slow fucking death. Like, what is inspiring about that? Please explain to me, what am I missing? I did not get any sort of like, don't miss out on your adventure and go live your life. Like, none of that said live your life to me, bruh. The fuck? None of that said go live your best life to me. That shit sounded depressing as shit. Like, dude gave up on life and then decided he was gonna go to some remote ass place where he could then just dwell in his own sorrows without any sort of fucking human interaction and shit. Like, that's what that sounded like to me, bro. I was not inspired, bro. I'm not
Was
inspired
an
by that.
18-year-old young man named
Not
Matt
at all.
Higgins who lived in Oregon. Matt was about to graduate high school, and unlike a lot of his peers, he had no idea what he should do after graduation,
feel
whether
that,
it was
but-
get a job or go to school.
I mean,
but
I knew I was
after
gonna get a job
watching
for
Into
sure.
the
I mean,
Wild,
I
a
was
third
doing
option
my
appeared
thing
to him,
already.
which was to head off into the wild, just like Christopher McCandless had done, except not permanently. Matt quickly fell
Okay,
in
good.
love with this option. He viewed it as a chance to kind of take a break from reality and go find himself, and then at the end of his stint in the wild, he could come back and, get a job or go to school. And so Matt's official Into the Wild plan was
sounds
that
like
he
he
graduate
really
in
didn't know what he was
2007,
gonna do.
and then in the spring of 2008, he would hike the entirety of the California section of the infamously rugged and beautiful Pacific Crest Trail. And he would do this all on his own. This section of the Pacific Crest Trail that he planned on hiking was roughly 1,700 miles long. It began on the border of Mexico in Southern California, and it wound its way north up to the border of Oregon. The trail
planned
cut through
on
deserts and
walking
up and
that
over
shit?
mountains, and there was lots of dangerous wildlife to contend with. And on top of that, there were many points along this trail where hikers were very isolated. They were not anywhere near civilization, and so if anything were to happen to them, they'd be on their own. And so naturally, this hike was not a beginner hike. However,
all.
Matt was not a beginner hiker. He had grown up hiking and camping all over Oregon and the western United States. He had spent time in totally well-marked and safe areas, and he had also spent time hiking around very dangerous and isolated areas where there were cougars and bears and unmarked cliffs everywhere. And so Matt felt like, with his experience in the outdoors, he was perfectly suited to take on this big of an adventure. And in many ways,
I'm going to go ahead and just say, see, that's that naive shit from people who are overly privileged in life sometimes and get to do fun. No, I'm not saying, I'm just joking. Has nothing to do with privilege. But I definitely do think that that was a super like naive thought process to think that he, just because you had been camping and hiking your whole life leading up to the fact of you graduating high school, like you were in some very controlled situations. Like you didn't just get to go walk and hike and camp by yourself. Like you were camping with probably, you know, at camps or hiking with other campers and stuff from at like little, you know, fucking summer camps and shit. He probably was camping with his mom and dad and family members and stuff like that, hiking with family members. Like a lot of the things that a lot of his experience was very sheltered experience is basically what I'm trying to get at. So that's a super naive thought to think like I'm experienced because I've been hiking and camping my whole life with my family. Like, bruh, camping by yourself and hiking by yourself is a completely fucking different like ball game, dog. Like completely different. There's not even a fucking comparison. But anyways, let's continue.
It's true.
Let's
However,
continue.
something was going to happen to him while he was out on the Pacific Crest Trail that no amount of hiking or camping experience could have prepared him
See?
for.
What did I
So
say?
Matt graduated from high school in 2007, and in keeping with his plan, in the spring of 2008, he packed up his stuff, he headed to the airport, and he flew south to Southern California. And when he got there, he made his way all the way south to the border of Mexico, and there he picked up the start of the Pacific Crest Trail, and he began heading north. For the first few weeks of his hike, Matt would spend the entire day hiking as far as his body would allow him, and then at night, when it got too dark or when he got too tired, he would just set up his campsite right off the edge of the trail, and then after a quick bite to eat, he'd climb inside of his tent and he'd go to sleep. And then the next day, he'd get up early and he'd do it all over again. During those first few weeks, the only real adversity that Matt ever faced, beyond just kind of normal fatigue from long-distance hiking, was at one point he got a little dehydrated, and another time he almost stepped on a rattlesnake. So besides those two things, really the hike had actually been fairly routine by Matt's standards. But when he reached the Lassen National Forest, which is a very dense forest in Northern California, located about 150 miles from the end of his hike, so the border of Oregon, when he got there, this hike of his would become anything but routine. Not long after stepping foot in Lassen Forest, Matt found himself walking along this winding dirt path where the trees on both sides of this path were pressed tightly up against the edges of this trail, and because of how densely packed the trees were together, it was almost like he had these walls on either side of him that extended 100 feet into the air. And so it was very quiet and it was very dark as he was walking along, but Matt was enjoying it. All he could hear was the chirping of birds and the insects buzzing around him.
I don't think there's enough weed that I could take with me to keep me calm in that situation. I'm just keeping it a buck. I would be fucking low-key freaking out. I would be panicking inside. Like, I would be walking way too fast, exerting way too much energy just out of fear. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, I really enjoy the mountains. I enjoy nature. I enjoy all that shit. But I'm not gonna sit here and flex like I don't enjoy as well having the security blanket of knowing that like people are around. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still like the idea of people being in somewhat of a vicinity of me, even if it's just family members. Like, just having other human beings close by is just a comfort that I'm not willing to give up. Like, I understand wanting to live, you know, or experience like some isolation, getting away from the city life and shit and all that. I get it because I'm a city boy through and through. I was born and raised in the city. But I'm not trying to be by myself in the goddamn creepy ass woods. I'm saying I'm gonna keep it a buck. Not
It was
gonna lie.
peaceful. And so Matt's just kind of meandering his way through the forest. He's in no rush. And at some point, the trail he was on banked hard to the right. And so he makes this turn. And as he does, he looks up. And what he
That
sees
shit is
kind of
hella
startles
sketchy,
him.
Trey.
About
For
20
sure.
feet away from him, off to the right side of the trail, is this big boulder. And sitting on this boulder are two middle-aged people, a man and a woman. They were both dressed head to toe in white. They both looked very dirty and disheveled. The man had this big, unkempt beard, and both of them were just staring daggers at Matt. And so Matt felt awkward, and he immediately looked down as he continued walking towards them. But as he got within a few feet, he looked up and kind of awkwardly smiled at them and waved and said hi, and they didn't respond. They just continued to stare at him with no
See, and this
discernible
is why
expression
your
on their
ass
face.
needs a
And they
dog,
watched him as he walked right past
gun,
them.
all
So
the
after Matt
above.
walked past these two people in white,
Where
he
is
felt
it at?
really uncomfortable because he knew they were still definitely staring at him as he walked away, and he didn't want to turn around and meet their eye contact. And so he's just kind of walking away, feeling that uncomfortable feeling of someone staring at him, and he's thinking to himself, why didn't they at least wave or acknowledge him in some way? Especially
Facts.
considering the fact that on the Pacific Crest Trail, people go days without seeing other people. Matt, in fact, had not seen another person in days until he saw these two. And so he's thinking, how rude is that to just completely not react when another
That's your
person walks
biggest
past
concern?
you on this trail? But Matt told him,
Look, again, that's the naiveness of him being so young, bro. Like that was your biggest concern, is that these people didn't wave at you? That they didn't acknowledge that you existed? Like, to me, that raises way more red flags than them just being fucking rude. I'm sorry. Like that to me right there is like, yo, my immediately, I'm bruh. they trying to get you, bro. I'd be immediately like worried that they're gonna kidnap me. And then once you have that whole like thought in your brain, it's like, well, what are they gonna do next? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like, bro.
you know what? I don't know these people. I don't know what their issues are. For all
But
I know,
Mike
they're
Blaze, yeah, you
foreign
know what
and
I'm
they didn't
saying? That's
understand what I
something.
said. And so maybe that's why they didn't say hello back. Who knows? But you know what? It's none of my business. And so Matt just continued walking along. He never turned around to look back at these two people in white. He just carried on. A few hours later, when the sun was starting to set, Matt was still walking along this winding trail with these huge trees on either side of him, and so visibility was getting pretty poor, and so he began looking for a place to make his camp. But because of how close these trees were to the edge of this trail, and considering how dense these trees were, there was no spot for him to make his campsite without completely blocking the trail. And Matt did not want to block the trail for other people, and so what he did is he left the trail and he walked 300 feet or so into these thick trees, where he found this little clearing, and that's where he set up his tent. Once it was all set up, he made some food for himself on his little stove, and then after he was done eating, he packaged up all of his leftover food inside of a waterproof bag, and he sealed that up, and then he tied some cord to the bag and threw the bag up and over a branch of a nearby tree and kind of tied it off so the bag was sitting well off the ground. This was to make sure no bears could get to his food. And so after his leftovers were secured high up in a tree, it was totally pitch black outside, and so Matt just climbed into his tent, he zipped it up, climbed into his sleeping bag, and he fell asleep. The next morning, Matt got up right
Sounds
as the
crazy.
sun was starting to rise, and so it was still pretty dark outside, but there was a little bit of light. And so Matt unzipped his tent and he looked outside, and the first thing he noticed was his bag of food that he had put up in the tree was gone. And so Matt stepped out of his tent and he looked around thinking, maybe it fell to the ground or something, but it wasn't there. It was just gone. And so Matt thought to himself, I didn't hear anything last night, but I guess a bear must have come into the campsite, found the food, and run off with it. And so Matt began walking over to the tree where he had strung the food up to begin looking on the ground for bear prints to confirm his theory that that was who took his food. And so he walks over, he's looking around, he doesn't see any bear prints, but he does see 2 sets of human boot prints, neither of which were his. And before he could even process that, he realized realized these prints, these human prints, were not just underneath this tree where the food was. These prints, as he looked around him, extended all the way up to his tent and all around his tent and all over his campsite. And so as Matt is looking at this crazy trail of human prints all over the place.
See, and the fact that they was able to walk around your shit and take your food and you didn't even wake up. See, imagine if you had a dog. If you would have brought you a little nice friendly companion, you would have been alerted. You know what I'm saying? They might have thought a little differently. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying.
He's thinking to himself,
man.
How is this possible? I went to bed last night when it was already pitch black outside, and I got up basically right at sunrise, so it was still dark outside. So these two people that were walking all over my campsite and cutting my food down, they somehow navigated here 300 feet off the main trail in the middle of nowhere. They navigated here in total pitch blackness, and they did it silently without waking me up. How is that even possible? And so after running through this thought process, Matt realized the only logical conclusion was that the two people he saw on the rock, the people in white, had followed him after seeing him. They saw where he left the trail, and they had waited until he fell asleep and then snuck out and robbed him. As Matt's thinking about this, he suddenly realized that maybe they're still around. Maybe he's still being watched. And so he began whipping his head around, looking in all directions, almost expecting to see the man and the woman in white kind of poking out from behind a tree. But when he looked around, he couldn't see anyone. However, he started to get that sense that he was being watched. And so feeling really uncomfortable, he quickly packed up his campsite and walked as quickly and calmly as he could toward the trail. And as he walked, he kept thinking to himself that these people are going to jump out from behind a tree, or they're going to grab me from behind. And so he's walking faster and faster and faster. And he finally gets to the trail, and he looks down the trail and up the trail. He kind of looks all around. He doesn't see anybody. And so he tells himself, okay, they're gone. So he took a deep breath, he composed himself, and he started walking north again along the trail. Matt walked for several hours, periodically looking over his shoulder, again expecting to see the man and woman in white, but he never did. And eventually, this narrow path kind of cutting through the dense forest opened up to this big, beautiful field. And by that point, the sun was high in the sky. And so Matt's walking in this very beautiful open area. He can see in all directions. There's sunlight beaming down on him. And so even though he was totally rattled by what had happened the night before, he found himself kind of becoming more at ease about the situation. He was far less paranoid, and he began telling himself, you know, as creepy as it is that those people in white almost certainly followed him and snuck up on his campsite in the middle of the night, as bad as that is, he thought, you know what, they probably were just super hungry and they clearly needed the food more than he did. And so, you know what, those people, they can have my food, whatever. And so Matt just continued on telling himself he would never have to deal with the people in white ever again.
He's only feeling that way because
over the next 3 days,
like when you sit there and try to rationalize shit like that, it's because you have no other option. There was no other option because there was no turning back. He wasn't going back the way he came. He wasn't going back towards those people. Like, let's be real about that. So the only fucking option he had was to go forward, and that way was the only, like, that the only thing he could do was rationalize it and just be like, all right, well, it is what it is, and just keep it pushing because there was no going any other direction. He wasn't about to go try to find it. He wasn't gonna sit there and go the other way. It was what it was at that point. Like, there was just no other rationalization that you could make. There was no other options.
Continued making his way north through the Lassen forest, and the trail he was on would weave between those big, beautiful open areas back inside those very densely forested areas where the trees were practically right on top of you. And during those 3 days, Matt did not see the people in white. He did not have any nighttime encounters with anybody. Nothing got stolen. And so that only reinforced the idea that, you know, he had been a target of opportunity. They had taken what they wanted from him, and they were no longer following him. But on the 4th day after the food stealing incident, things would get spooky for Matt again. On that 4th night, Matt was once again forced to leave the trail he was on. He was in one of those very densely forested areas and walk well off the trail to find a clearing for his tent. And so he walked, several hundred feet away. He finds this clearing. He sets up his tent. And then also he sets up a perimeter of sticks all around the outside of his campsite. This was a precaution he had begun taking after the food stealing incident. These These sticks were an early warning system where if any animal or person came too
That's
close to
smart.
his
I wouldn't have thought to
campsite,
do that.
they would step, in theory, on these sticks and
super
they would
smart.
break and they would alert Matt in the middle of the night. And so after his campsite was all set up and all prepared, Matt sat down and had a quick bite to eat, and then after storing his food, he climbed inside of his tent and he fell asleep. Before we finish the story, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, HelloFresh.
Shout out to you and HelloFresh, but we aren't sponsored by them, so we'll keep it
Okay,
patient.
back to the story.
That shit is wild.
A few
bro.
hours later, Matt suddenly woke up. Now, when he woke up, he opened his eyes, but it's pitch black in his tent, there are no windows in his tent, and it's pitch black outside. So even with his eyes open, he can't see anything. And so he's just laying there with his eyes open, but it's total darkness, and he's just listening intently, because he doesn't really know why he woke up, if something startled him, or if there's no reason at all. And so he's just laying there and he's listening, and as he's listening, he hears the distinct sound of something stepping on one of the sticks in his perimeter. And so he hears the stick break and his heart just starts racing, because he knows that an animal or a person is just a few feet away from him. And so instinctively, he kind of begins to pull his arm as quietly as he can out of his sleeping bag, and he reaches over and he grabs his hunting knife. And as he grabs the handle of the knife and he brings it closer to him, he hears the sound of more footsteps. Whatever has stepped on the stick has not slowed down at all. They don't care about the sound they just made. They're still moving towards his tent. And so Matt's starting to get really freaked out, because he knows that, it could be an animal, but just a couple of days ago, 2 people were in his campsite stealing his food and walking all around his tent. And so that's what's going through his head. And so Matt's laying there preparing himself to potentially have to slash out if anybody came close to his tent. I mean, he's in the middle of nowhere. If a person is out here, it's not his friend. And so he's laying there, he's kind of shaking, and he's listening really intently, and the footsteps are just getting closer and closer and closer to his tent until they stop right next to his head. They are literally about a foot away from him. And so he can't see anything. He's just listening really intently. And then he starts to hear whispering. But the whispering is not coming from this person right here. The whispering is coming from everywhere in the forest. It's coming from all different directions. And so Matt doesn't know what to think about this. And as he's hearing this whispering, which is getting more and more frantic, whoever is standing right outside of his tent begins circling his tent. So now he hears footsteps just walking in a circle around his tent while frantic whispers are coming in from all directions. And so at this point, Matt is so terrified, he's just frozen. He knows that he's holding that knife, but he won't be able to do anything with it. He's just petrified. And then as soon as this total nightmare had begun, it just stopped. The whispering, silence. The footsteps stopped. And so in a way, it was kind of relieving, but in another way, Matt's laying there thinking, I want to hear the sound of footsteps retreating into the forest, leaving, but I haven't heard that. It went from footsteps all around the tent and whispering everywhere to silence, as if whoever is out there is still out there, and they're just standing there waiting for him.
That's a definite, like,
so
just
dark,
bust shots, ask questions later situation.
He can't look outside and see, and so he's left just laying in his tent, wondering if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people are just waiting outside of his tent. He's got no idea. And so finally, the sun would come up in the morning, and again, Matt has not heard the sound of retreating footsteps, and so maybe they're still just standing outside. But once the sun had totally come up and there was some light outside that he could see through his tent, Matt decided he just had to check. And so he reached over and he quickly unzipped the flap of the tent and he looked outside. He didn't see anyone. He leapt outside with his knife, ready to confront anyone who was out there, but there was no one. And so Matt, he's not thinking, oh, great, they're gone. He's thinking, are they just like a few feet away, hiding behind trees?
Right,
and so for a few minutes, Matt just began looking all around his campsite, kind of expecting to see, those people in white or other people he doesn't know, but he doesn't see anyone. And then Matt starts thinking to himself, was this just a nightmare? Did that not even happen? Am I imagining this? But when he looked down, He saw clear bootprints all over his campsite,
so
including a nice
serious? Okay.
track
Why so
all the way
serious?
around
Gang, I
his
like it.
tent.
That's a dope name.
And so this nightmare really had played out in real life.
That's
and so
terrible.
he quickly gets everything back into his pack, he throws it on his shoulder, and he just starts running back towards the trail. And when he got to the trail, he continued running north. And as he's running along and looking over his shoulder the whole time, he's telling himself, I just need to get out of Lassen National Forest. I need to get out of the people in white's turf, get away from this place, and I'll be left alone. And so that motivated him to spend the whole day moving as fast as he possibly could. And by that afternoon, he had finally escaped Lassen National Forest. He was out, and he was in one of these smaller towns that kind of butted up alongside this forest. And so
That's what I
night,
would have
he
called a
camped
ride. I'm
out
going
right
home.
near this town. He wanted to be as close to
I would be
civilization as
going
possible
home.
to ensure his safety. And so as he's laying in his tent that night, he began thinking about what had happened over the past couple of days. At this point, he was nearly certain that the people in white that he had seen on that boulder, they had to be behind these nighttime encounters. They just had to be. And so he's thinking to himself, okay, well, the
Jeffries?
first encounter I had with them, when they stole his food, yeah, that's creepy, but it makes sense. They followed him, they went to his campsite, they stole his food. Okay, fine. That makes sense to him. But the second encounter, the one that had happened the night before,
you can rationalize
that
that first one.
sense. Assuming
second
it
one,
was,
no.
again, the people in white responsible, that meant they had been following Matt the whole time, and he had not seen them somehow, even though over the last couple of days, he had been looking over his shoulder constantly, looking for those people, but he didn't see them, and they still managed to follow him all the way over several days to this other unmarked campsite, hundreds of feet off the main trail. So how did they do that? And then two, once they were at his campsite and he's laying there listening to them, walking around the campsite, whispering to each other, what were they doing? And then how did the footsteps and whispering just stop immediately, and he didn't even hear the sound of them retreating into the woods? How did they do that? And so Matt would go over this until finally he would fall asleep. And then the next morning when he got up, it was the first thing he was thinking about, the people in white. What were they doing and why and where were they? And so as Matt packed up his campsite that morning, it did cross his mind, that maybe he should just stop the hike right now and call his family, have them come pick him up and get out of here.
Do that.
This hike, this huge hike he had planned, was really important to him, and he was only about 100 miles away from the finish line, which meant he had already hiked over 1,600 miles, and he just didn't want to quit. He wanted to finish what he started. And so he packed up his stuff, he threw it over his shoulder, and he continued on. And so that day, Matt would leave that little town, and he would make his way up into another very dense forest called the Mount Shasta forest. Mount Shasta was a lot like the Lassen forest, except Mount Shasta has a very disturbing backstory. Specifically, lots and lots of people go missing inside of Mount Shasta, and often they go missing under baffling circumstances. The most frightening of these missing persons reports are when someone comes back, the survivor of the event, and they will say, they saw their hiking companion. They clearly saw them. And then they turned their back on them just for a few moments, few minutes, whatever it was. And when they turned back around, the person they were with was now gone. No trace of them, nothing. They're just gone. And despite a massive search for them, they're never found again. There is a distressing number of missing people in Mount Shasta that sound just like that. It's totally terrifying. So with that in mind, Matt makes his way into the Mount Shasta forest. And even though it totally stressed him out to once again be walking on these dirt pathways where the trees are very tight on either side of you, they're very dense, and as he's walking, he's kind of looking in both directions, expecting to see somebody watching him. Despite feeling that way, Matt just continued to stay focused and kept telling himself to just continue on, because you're so close to the end. And so the first 3 days that he was in the Mount Shasta forest, Matt would just keep his head down, and very stoically every day he would just hike as far as he possibly could. In the evening, he would set up his campsite either right off the trail or maybe a little ways off the trail in a clearing, and he didn't have any run-ins with the people in white or anybody else for that matter. He was totally left alone. But on his fourth day in the Mount Shasta forest, all that would change. On that fourth day, Matt found himself not inside one of those very dense forested areas, but rather in this very open trail that was up on the side of this mountain. And because this trail was fairly high up in elevation, the tree coverage was fairly sparse, and so there was great visibility. He could see miles ahead of him, and when he turned around, he could see miles behind him. And so Matt is just walking along this trail, kind of enjoying the day. It's beautiful outside, and at some point, he turns around and looks behind him. Now, all day he'd been doing that, and he had not seen anyone. But this time, when he turned around, he saw two little white dots, miles and miles back, slowly making their way along the trail that he was on. It was the people in white. They were back. At this point, Matt was at least 50 miles or more away from that first place he had walked past the people in white when they were sitting on that boulder. Which meant, one, Matt was right. These people in white really had followed him and almost certainly were responsible for the nighttime visits he was getting. And two, for reasons unknown, they were still following him. Matt suddenly didn't care at all about completing his big hike. He just wanted to get the heck away from those people. And so very quickly he pulled out his map and he looked, and to his horror, he realized he was in one of the most isolated portions of the entire hike. He was at least 25 miles away from the nearest civilization, a little town called Castella, California. And so without a better option, Matt put the map back in his pocket. He took one last look at the people in white who were making steady gains on him, and then Matt just turned away from them and began booking it down the trail. And Matt would run for hours and hours and hours without stopping. Even when he turned around and could no longer see the people in white, he just kept on running. And then when the sun set and he could barely see the trail, he just kept on running. It literally wasn't until it was so dark outside that he actually couldn't see the ground anymore that Matt finally, totally exhausted, came to a stop. And then from there, he turned and left the trail and walked way away from the trail, hundreds of feet deep into the forest, to get as far away from these people in white as he possibly could. And so finally, he found this clearing very far away from the trail. He set up his tent right in the middle of it, and then he very diligently laid out his perimeter of sticks around his campsite, making sure there were no gaps. And then he climbed inside of his tent, he zipped it up, and then keeping on all of his stuff in case he needed to make a run for it, he got inside of his sleeping bag, and he just laid there with no expectation that he was going to sleep.
I'm gonna pause it real quick. Is it glitching for you guys? I feel like it's like fucking tripping. Is the video like fucking going bananas right now? I'm trying to figure out why. Okay. Hold on. Let me switch internets.
He was terrified.
All right. Yo, all right, are we better now? I just switched it to my other Wi-Fi signal. When my internet cut off, I think it connected me to my weaker signal. All right. Hopefully
as he laid there, he thought to himself, okay, I have now run at least several miles ahead of them. I know that was them. I know I got some distance on them. There's no way they saw where I turned off the trail and where I've set up this campsite, so they can't possibly find me. And so Matt would lay in the tent for several hours just waiting to fall asleep. And then finally he would start to get tired, because at this point it's totally quiet outside. He hasn't heard anything. And so he begins to doze off to sleep. And as he's getting more and more tired, he hears the sound of someone stepping on his perimeter of sticks. And as soon as he hears that stick break, he hears the all too familiar whispering pick up all around the forest. And then something new happens. Before Matt can even do anything, his tent lights up like a Christmas tree. Someone is shining a light on his tent. Someone has snuck up on his campsite in the middle of nowhere, hundreds and hundreds of feet off the trail, in the middle of the night. They found him, and they're shining a light on him, and then the light clicks off, and it's silent. And at this point, Matt's fight or flight instinct kicks in, and he rips off his sleeping bag, he jumps outside, and begins screaming nonsense and flailing around with a knife, trying to intimidate these people to get away from him. And then after he stops for a second, he hears a stick crunch right behind him, and he whips his head around to look at who is standing right behind him, and as he's turning out of his peripheral vision, he sees a dark figure running towards him. He doesn't think twice, he just turns and begins running away from the campsite. Now remember, it's pitch black in the forest. There's trees everywhere. And so Matt's smashing into trees, branches are hitting him, he's falling to the ground, but he is on a pure adrenaline high, and he is just sprinting as fast as he possibly can away from this person who is likely still chasing him. And after 5 minutes of running, he stumbles and falls forward and kind of lands at the base of this fallen tree. The tree had landed in such a way that it was kind of propped on a rock, so there was a small gap underneath the tree.
Bro,
and so
this
Matt,
shit is
thinking
wild.
quickly, kind of slid himself
Could you
underneath this
imagine?
log and positioned himself so he was looking back in the direction he was running from. And as he laid there, he saw in the distance this light bobbing around. These people are looking for him. They're searching the forest for him. And so he watched in horror, tucked underneath this log, as whoever had the light and whoever else was with them, they moved closer and closer and closer, but they did not find him tucked underneath the log. They just walked right on past him. And so Matt would remain underneath this log all night until finally the sun came up. And at that point, even though it was fairly obvious that whoever was looking for him, they were now gone, Matt was still terrified. And so he stayed under the log for several hours until it was about early afternoon. And then he finally pulled himself out from under the log and he looked around. He couldn't see anyone. And then instead of going back to his campsite and getting his gear, he just totally abandoned it. He was worried that these people in white or whoever it was, that they were still going to be there. And so he just turned and continued running away from his campsite back out to the trail. And once he got the trail, he continued running on the trail all the way to Castella, California. And when he got there, he hitchhiked his way to the town of Mount Shasta. And there he would speak to police as well as the Forestry Service about what he had experienced. And so they would take all of his information down and they would put him up in a motel for the night. And then the next day, Matt would get in touch with his family and they would drive from Oregon to Mount Shasta. They would pick him up and they would take him back home. Months later, Matt would contact the Mount Shasta police and the Forest Service and would just follow up and say, hey, have you learned anything else about these people in white? Have you caught them? Has anybody else come forward? And the police would say, you know, they did have a number of people coming forward saying that things had been stolen from their campsites. These are people that were in Mount Shasta, in Lassen Forest, and the surrounding forests. But Matt was the only one who had reported being terrorized by this mysterious couple in white. And so to this day, Matt has no idea who those two people were, what they wanted with him, beyond obviously the food they took. I mean, they continued to stalk him for nearly 100 miles. And he has no idea how they were able to keep finding his campsites that were hundreds of feet off the main trail in unmarked areas that they would somehow navigate to in total darkness without alerting Matt. It's all a big mystery.
Yeah. The mystery is solved.
So Matt's going to do it.
His ass needs to just stay at home. Solved. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. That was one of them stories that, like, I'm sure there was probably some weird, creepy shit, but I feel like 90% of his problems were caused because he was by himself. You know, not saying that it was right. Just saying that I think if he would have not been by himself, he might not have had the same experience that he encountered in that particular situation. Those situations. But anyways, let's move on. Let's go see what Darkest Secret's doing. We got ghost videos so incredible you won't believe they're real. All right, let's see. Let's find out.
The technological advances in audiovisual recordings that has been achieved recently
nuts, though, for sure,
has called into question a large amount of inexplicable footage. Videos that are immediately discarded due to its level of impact and spectacular nature. Although, among them, there are also clips that I have personally analyzed in depth, in which, up to now, I have not found any arguments that rule out their veracity, Will you dare watch them? Well, then stay. My name is Leonore Clay.
She's got a creepy
And this
ass
is
voice.
The Darkest Secret. Today we present those videos
bring a
so
buddy.
incredible you won't believe they're
Could have been
real.
a target of human sacrifice
Number
for sure.
5.
Could have been all sorts of things. But him being by himself definitely did not help the situation. What up, Allied Darkness?
The man you see now on the screen is a driver who works with the Uber mobile application. He was the one who sent us this recording to study it. He tells us that a couple of nights ago, he was parking his vehicle after a client canceled his trip on a cold and rainy night. At that exact moment, something completely terrifying is caught on camera. Observe.
What? I'm like waiting to see something creepy. Where's it at? I'm looking out the window. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa! What the fuck was in the back seat?
It was not until the next day, when seeing these images, he realized that something was in the back seat the entire time. A being with a creepy appearance that, according to speculation, may have entered the vehicle after dropping off a passenger in a remote rural area. The man
So that nigga
completely
hitchhiked
terrified
his
tells
ass
me that
back
after
to
his
to
experience,
civilization?
it is very difficult for him to continue working as an Uber driver.
Hell
Could
yeah!
what
I've
you
been
see
like,
in the
all right, this whole
image be
car
a
got.
ghost?
Bruh, you catch some shit like that, you gotta throw the whole car away. I would not get back in that car at all, and I would be terrified that the motherfucker's in my house now. Shit, like what would you do? Oh man, yeah, no, I quit.
Tell me
Oh,
what you
man.
think.
The fuck?
Number 4.
Man, I don't even have an Xbox controller that works right now, personally, bro.
We continue with a
I
disturbing
haven't played a
recording
video
that was
game
sent
in
to
so
me
long.
by Victor Centurion, a
Ain't gonna
faithful
lie to you.
subscriber from Paraguay who mentions that the footage that you will see next was captured in a cemetery in his
They
country.
got a damn demon in his car
Without
and shit.
specifically mentioning its
Fucking hell.
location, he says
Yeah,
that
sell
in
the
this
whole car.
cemetery, it's becoming
Burn
very
it. I
common
don't
to
know,
witness
do something.
phenomena
Throw that bitch off
as
a bridge.
strange as this.
Why is that thing not sitting still? And they're just laughing about this shit. Bruh, go ahead and just leave. Just leave.
In his email, he emphasizes that he does not want to reveal the exact place where this phenomena occurred, to protect the tranquility of the area. However, he also points out that the people who come to see their relatives are frightened by these unexplainable manifestations, which worries visitors, workers, and administrators of the religious field. What's happening in this cemetery?
I don't know. But
Leave
you
it in
shouldn't
the
be there
comments.
messing with that shit.
Number 3.
I just didn't understand how they was just sitting there just.
As I mentioned at the
Laughing
beginning,
about it.
on the internet, all kinds of videos abound. Many of them are recordings
Oh,
like
they about
this
to
one,
get snatched up by
which,
the
due
predator.
to their images, become tremendously popular. In fact, there were several subscribers who sent me this video to review and analyze its paranormal level. Unfortunately, this is a fake recording,
Yeah, I was about to say that shit look fake as
created
fuck.
simply to entertain. Yes, it may be scary.
If you that shit ain't scary. If a motherfucker saw some shit like that, the fact that they ain't even moving, they're like, yeah, like look at it. yeah. Like, no, motherfucker. If you seen some shit for real, your ass would be hightailing it out of there, screaming like a little bitch. You know what I'm saying? Let's be real, because that's what I'd be doing.
But from a vast distance, you already know that nothing of what you see is real. Videos of this type clearly attract a lot of attention.
It's real.
Even some credulous people described it at the time as
watching that?
the strangest paranormal event of this
I guess
year.
us too.
However, for me,
right now. But
the truly strange and paranormal thing that has actually been repeating itself this year are the well-known invading lights. Since I did my research on them, such recordings have not stopped coming.
Yeah, see, I got little aliens, little baby UFOs and shit flying through your houses.
Lights that without a known light source are present inside houses or other buildings, as if they were exploring or looking for something.
Yeah.
In fact, in this particular recording, the light seems to illuminate the areas where it passes, something that allows us to think that it is real and not CGI. As I mentioned, to my surprise, footage like these continue to arrive by the dozens to my email.
There's like hella little aliens
Why are these
and shit out here
demonstrations
looking
being
for,
so
looking for y'all's
encouraged?
draws or something.
What is behind all this?
Fucking the government or something.
Let
I
me
don't
know your theories.
Look,
Number
they over here
2.
flying and scanning y'all's houses. We'll just say it's the government. What up, Wes?
The following corresponds to an unfortunate traffic accident captured by a security camera on the island of San Pedro, Belize, a place where the use of golf carts has become widespread as a means of transport. In the image, you can see the exact moment in which the collision occurs, leaving the unfortunate death of a young woman as a result. Do you know what the scariest thing is? After the accident, one of the survivors was asked what had caused it, to which she replies that they saw a child running across the street, something they assume caused them to lose control. However, this video hides something else.
Like, see her soul leave her body or some shit?
Just moments after the crash, from the overturned car, the figure of a child appears who does not seem to have any injuries, as if nothing had happened, and who mysteriously disappears in the shadows of the night.
I did see that the first time. I just didn't realize that it was nobody.
According to some residents of the sector, a minor similar to the one in the image had been run over by one of those same vehicles a couple of months ago. An accident that cost him his life, and that coincidentally occurred in the same place.
That's wild.
Unfortunate tragedies, where it is said that unknown forces were involved. Number 1. We finished this video with a disturbing clip sent by Jacob, when his email tells us that one night while he was walking towards his home, he found a strange plastic doll lying on the ground. It seemed curious to him because of its strange appearance, so he decided to take it home.
Oh, you decided to take a creepy ass doll?
He points out that he later gave it to his aunt, who was a lover and collector of these types of objects, so he assumed that he wouldn't see it again. He never imagined that his aunt would send him footage that he will never forget. Pay attention.
Oh, so you gave your aunt a creepy ass... What the fuck is that? It just blinked.
It did not have moving parts anywhere, least of all in its eyes. So the video that his aunt recorded is
burn that
completely
shit
inexplicable.
now.
She also makes it clear that she barely knows how to record with her cell phone. So the idea of a possible
Chop
intervention
his
in the
head
image is completely discarded. How is this possible? Let me know what you think of this and the other footage presented in the comment box. Because this video has come to an end.
That is
My name is Leonore Clay,
throw that shit away.
and this was
Throw that shit all the way away. Yeah, we don't want no parts of that shit. Fuck that. Oh man, that was wild. All right, hold on. There's a, where's that? Oh, there it is. This chilling scares. This shit is, they be having some pretty decent videos in this. Let's go see what we can find. Let's go see what we can find. I want to see this one right here. Alright, 3 downright horrifying true neighbor horror stories. We all got them neighbor horror stories, you know what I'm saying? Let's see if
When I was 30 years old, I'd saved enough money to buy my first house. It wasn't anything special, and honestly, all things considered, it wasn't in the best neighborhood either. But I was still proud of the accomplishment nonetheless.
facts.
I'd met all the nearby neighbors in, I'd say, the first 2 weeks I moved in. Considering the neighborhood, I was surprised to discover they all actually seemed pretty nice. A couple of them even invited me over for dinner a few times. And having lived in different apartments all my life, this wasn't really something I was used to. Of course, they weren't all like this, however. 2 houses down from the house I moved into lived a man that was probably 50 years old. Upon moving in, every other night or so, the dude would knock at my front door at some absurd hour asking for stuff. So, like, as an example, the first time it happened, he asked me if I had any spare bread I wasn't gonna eat. Another time, he asked me if I could fill up a bucket with water, because his was turned off. It was just random, but somewhat understandable things like that. But
Nigga, if somebody comes to my house late at night and is like, yo, bro, you got some bread you ain't gonna eat? I'm gonna look at this motherfucker and be like, what? Yeah, you gotta go hit the food bank, bro. Like, the fuck? like I would just be weirded out. Like, I'm not giving you shit because I'm weirded out at this point. Like, no, I don't got no fucking bread that I'm not gonna eat. Nigga, I got 3 kids. The fuck you think this is around here?
the one he started asking me for money. I figured I had no obligation to be constantly meeting this guy's needs.
Facts, you
I mean,
don't.
I had pretty much just met the dude. I'd started opening the door to his knocks less and less, but this didn't seem to have any effect on the number of times he would show up. Fast forward to a night a few weeks later, and again another knock. I planned to ignore it, like I'd grown accustomed to doing by that point. But as I looked through the people, I noticed the guy looked distressed. Seeing this, I decided the right thing to do would be to open up the door. So
Right.
I did.
What? I
I
wouldn't
asked him
open
what
up
he
that
needed,
door,
and
especially
what
if
he
he's
responded
in,
with was
if he's
not at all the type
panicking.
of response I was expecting. He asked me if I could come over and show him how to use this new grill. Now, this happened around midnight, which in my opinion was an extremely odd time to start grilling. But
I'm like,
against my
nah,
better
I'll come over
judgment,
tomorrow
I decided I would help
when
him.
it's sun out.
I was pretty into cooking at that point in my life, and figured taking 10 minutes to show the guy how a grill worked wouldn't be the end of the world. I told him that I'd be over in a second, and that I just needed to put some shoes on. He thanked me and started walking back. A couple minutes later, and I made my way over to his house. I opened some gate and walked into his backyard. It was dark, so it was hard to see, but it was clear there was no grill. On top of that, the guy was nowhere in sight. Although his back door was wide open, I stuck my hand inside and yelled out for the guy. "Yeah, I'm down here. I need your help getting some meat from the freezer."
Fuck that.
Muffled response came from
Nope.
a set of stairs just to the left of me.
Bro, no. That, like, go home, lock the door, call the police. Hey, man, y'all need to go do a wellness check on this dude over here 2 doors down from me, bro. I don't know, man. Something's going on in this dude's basement. I heard some noises. Y'all should just go check it out. You know what I'm saying? I'm not real sure, but I'm real terrified. You know what I mean? Like, I would have just took my ass home.
I was hesitant to go down. There were no lights on down there. In fact, there wasn't a single light on throughout the whole house. I yelled down the stairs, asking him if he could turn on a light so I could see. There was silence for a few seconds. Eventually he responded, "No, they're broken. I can't do that." I knew something was off at that point. I yelled back something like, "I think I'm just gonna go, man."
Yeah.
I kid you not. The second after I said this, audible footsteps started sprinting up the stairs. My flight reaction kicked in immediately. I ran directly back to my house and locked the door behind me. I pulled back a set of curtains and looked out one of my windows, but I didn't see anything. I was terrified. I thought about calling the police, but decided against it, figuring I really wouldn't be able to prove anything that just happened. For the next few days, I didn't leave my house for anything except work. During those days, I never saw the guy, nor did any late-night knocks occur. Exactly 1 week after it happened, I was talking with my neighbor across the street. The conversation eventually landed on what I experienced, and how I was planning to move because of it. But I was just met with a look of confusion. I was then informed that no one lived in the house I was talking about. It had been abandoned for 2 years. This prompted my neighbor to call the police.
Hell no.
However, the police would find nothing inside or around the house. I moved out a few weeks later, so that's all I know. I'm not sure if
Hell yeah,
anything
he
else
said
came
I
from the
moved out a
situation or
few
not.
weeks later. That was the
I
smartest
still
shit
don't know who that guy
nigga
was,
did.
or what he
He
was trying to
said,
lure me
fuck
into.
that. One and done. I'm out of here. Someone else can come deal with this shit. I'm done. Realtor,
This happened during the
sell
summer
my
before my
shit. I know
sophomore year in
I
college.
just moved in, but
At that
sell
time,
this
I was
shit.
doing a lot of research
and
for a
find
place
me
I could
something
live during
else.
the coming school year that was close to
Go ahead and
campus.
just put me in a nice
I found
suburban
multiple good-looking
neighborhood.
apartments,
All
but
them white
all of them were
folk.
way out of my budget.
Fuck that.
I quickly figured out that if I wanted to live close to campus, I would need a roommate that could help pay each month's rent. I posted an ad on Craigslist explaining my situation, hoping someone would be interested. Not even an hour after I posted the ad, I got a response. Apparently,
That's
it
not
was
even
some
how you
older lady
spell
in her
weed,
70s.
so I know you lying.
I was kind of expecting it to be another student from my university, but I figured it didn't really matter.
Yeah,
As long as they were willing to pay half of the rent, I didn't really care. Plus, I didn't get any further responses in the next week, so I took the one opportunity I was given. Fast forward to the start of the school semester, and the two of us moved in. She introduced herself as Dorothy. She was short and had white hair. Although a little quiet, she seemed nice. I figured we'd get along fine, so I wasn't too worried about the coming months. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We had the occasional small talk conversation when we were both in the kitchen, but that was about it. For the most part, she would spend all of her time in her bedroom. Occasionally, while I was watching TV in the living room at night, I would hear this high-pitched giggling coming through the walls.
Oh, bro, no, moving
The
out.
first few times it happened, I just assumed she was on her phone or something. But then I realized I never actually heard her talking. It was just her giggling. I couldn't imagine what she was doing. Over time, things just kept
flipping
getting
her
weirder.
bean.
For example, she would start coming out of her room for no
She is a bean flicker. She was giggling about it.
purpose than to watch me. She would stand in the kitchen or hallway just looking at me while I watched TV.
Oh,
or made
yeah.
myself
See, perfect. There's the logic right there. She was getting off to mental images of you, brother. She was probably sitting there. There's probably hidden cameras all throughout that motherfucker. She was in there blah, 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 flicking her little bean and shit to you, bruh.
Needless to say,
Peace out.
I was getting more and more
Bye, Jay.
uncomfortable around her. One night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. to the sound of slight knocking on my bedroom door. Not knocking like trying to get my attention, but slow, soft, and barely audible knocking. I yelled out Dorothy's name, and right as I did, the knocking stopped. I knew it was her, because shortly after I heard her same giggling, followed by footsteps walking back to her room. I'd be lying if I said this didn't freak me out.
Yeah,
I didn't have a lock on my door, so nothing was stopping her from coming into my room while I was sleeping. I didn't sleep at all the rest of that night. I had planned on confronting her about the situation the next day, but she never left her room once. Come night again, and I decided to move my desk in front of my door as a makeshift barricade. Cause, I mean, again, I didn't have a lock on my
Right,
door.
he's
and I did not feel
terrified
comfortable
now.
having nothing
He said,
stopping
"Oh,
her from entering my
shit."
room. 3 hours later, and I woke up to the sound of my desk being hit by my door from someone attempting to open it. It was Dorothy. I could see her eye peeking through the crack of the slightly open door. Before I could even say anything, she started screaming and banging on my door. My desk started to give way, so I got out of bed and helped the door close myself. The screaming and banging went on for 2 more minutes. Once it finally stopped, I got up and called the police. When they arrived, I opened the door to my bedroom, and my heart dropped. Every single one of the knives from our kitchen had been stabbed into the door. I was absolutely horrified, but I tried to compose myself. I briefly explained the situation to the 2 officers that arrived. I also told them which room Dorothy was in. She would provide a struggle in being detained, but they would ultimately take her away. The next month, I would move to another apartment, this time with some actual students from my university.
Bro.
I still don't understand what made Dorothy do what she did. My best guess is she had some severe untreated condition she wasn't on medication for. But then again, maybe not. Maybe she seriously intended to use those knives on me in my sleep. But because I took the precaution of pushing my desk in front of my door, I luckily didn't have to find out.
That shit is freaky. That is fucking what would you do? Like, I mean, because the thing is, like, he didn't know that the fucking knives was in the door until the cops got there and they opened the door, or he opened it for them, and to sit there and be like, holy shit, like, what the like, bruh, you crazy bitch.
This experience happened to me when I was only 10 years old. Being that it was so long ago, I don't remember every small detail, but I'll do my best to keep everything as accurate as possible. Back then, I lived in a considerably remote area in the US. Neighboring houses were a good half-mile apart. Therefore, while my family had met a couple of our neighbors, many of them were complete strangers. This included the resident of the house to the left of ours. I don't remember his name, but it was an elderly man that lived there. He was creepy to say the least. All of the windows on his house were spray painted so that no one could see inside, and his whole yard was completely overgrown. I know all this because every Monday through Friday I had to walk past his house to get home from school. Every time I did this, the man would either be standing on his porch watching me or trying to make conversation with me as I walked by. It got to the point where I dreaded walking home from school just because I'd have to walk past him. But this wasn't even the worst of it. Maybe once or twice a month, the guy would make the half-mile walk to our house in the middle of the night. He would then shine a flashlight into the window of my room. I knew it was the same guy too, because one of the times I witnessed him walking down the road towards our house. Looking back, this was 100% extremely alarming behavior. But at the time, I thought the best way of handling it was just to ignore it. Therefore, I didn't tell my parents about it. I also remember reasoning that my bedroom was on the 2nd floor, so it's not like he was able to see much of inside my room anyway. Skip to a summer night in that same year, and I was once again woken up by the light of a flashlight shining in my room. Though, this time it was followed by a subtle thud sound against the wall. It felt like my heart had stopped. The only thing running through my mind in that moment was how it sounded exactly like a ladder being propped up against the side of the house. Not long later, my suspicions would be confirmed. A knocking sound rang out from the glass of the window. I looked over and was met with the smiling face of the man gesturing me to open the window. But no, I screamed and ran to my parents' bedroom. I desperately explained to them how the neighbor was outside my window. They went in my room, but of course he was gone by that point. The worst part is, they didn't even believe me, chalking it up to me seeing things. Therefore, the police were never called. But even now as an adult, I know exactly what I saw. I try not to think about the intentions that guy had towards my 10-year-old self. I never saw him again after that. In fact, not even a week after the occurrence, and his house had a for sale sign up next to it, which to me serves as further proof that it was him. I've lived in many different places since then, and not one neighbor comes even slightly close to how creepy that man was.
I bet. That sounds terrible. That sounds fucking terrible. Yeah, fuck that. Those were some creepy ass neighbor stories, bro. Like I've had some bad neighbors, but like the worst neighbor problems I've had was like domestic violence situations where like you be hearing, fucking neighbors getting their ass beat and shit. Like, I live in the hood and shit. I mean, I ain't never had nobody try to fucking stab me with knives and shit through like, a whole bunch. Like it's one thing you get in an argument, motherfucker just want to, get violent, but like to creep up on you at 2-3 o'clock in the morning and shit with every goddamn fucking kitchen knife that they own and trying to like, bruh, Fuck, that shit is wild, bro. All right, let's watch this one right here. 8 most disturbing things discovered in basements. That sounds wild. That little fucking doll looks creepy as fuck.
This first discovery happened to multiple students of Ohio State University back in September of 2013. The group of students only recently started leasing an off-campus house close to the school, and it was in this house where they would make a disturbing find in the basement. Only a month after moving in, the students would start to notice small yet strange occurrences in the house. Things like cupboards, their oven, and even their microwave being left open. The house was 3 stories, with 5 students on the first floor and 10 others on the second and third, so obviously it was difficult to keep track of everyone. But when they realized none of them were responsible, they decided to search the house, more specifically the basement. What they found was a locked door, which they had originally assumed was a utility closet that the landlord wanted to be kept locked. Though at no point in time was this confirmed, and after calling the landlord about it, they were informed this wasn't the case. The door should not have been locked for any reason. The landlord would end up sending a maintenance worker to check it out, and after breaking down the door, a room that was clearly being lived in was revealed. The room had framed photos and school textbooks scattered around. The students would change all the locks that night and leave a note for whoever was living in the room saying to call them. The man would actually end up calling the number and later be removed from the household. It turns out the guy was a cousin to one of the house's previous residents, which is how he got a key in the first place. One of the students even recalled running into the man in the basement at one point earlier in the month and asking who he was, but only to be met with a very vague answer. Ultimately, the students would blame the leasing company of the home for the incident, as they were responsible for failing to change the locks from the year before.
That wasn't as bad. Shit, at least they was able to figure it out.
In June of 2020, a man named Christopher Town would make a life-threatening discovery while helping his friend move furniture in his basement.
Just living in the basement.
Unknown to both of them at the time was the fact that the house itself was built over a well. And so at one point, when Christopher was making his way across the room, the floorboards just underneath him would snap, which caused him to fall the 25-foot drop to the bottom. Fortunately, there was water at the bottom to break his fall, though this meant Christopher would have to use the rocks on the wall to hold his head above the water while he waited for the local fire department to arrive. And to make things worse, the water itself was at an extremely low temperature. Though, after only a few minutes, the fire department was able to successfully get Christopher out using a hauling system. And other than almost getting hypothermia, Christopher would make it out unhurt.
What the fuck? Bro, could
Mike
you
Carroll was a
imagine
man
just
who lived
be
in a
walking
small
in your
house in
fucking
Lake Grove,
basement
New
and
York,
fall through that bitch?
which was the same house he had grown up in. Mike was 57 at the time, and only a few months prior had purchased the house. Though, while he was in the basement, Mike would make a disturbing discovery. He would find a full set of human bones buried under some dirt.
Oh, shit.
But what makes this find so disturbing is the fact that the bones match the DNA of his father. When Mike was only 8 months old, his father was said to have gone missing. And throughout his childhood, he would question his mother about this. But each time he was given a different story. So, of course, this made Mike want to find out for himself what had really happened to his father. Which is what gave him motivation to buy his childhood house in the first place.
Oh,
The newly
shit.
found bones would obviously...
So his mom knocked his dad off and buried that nigga in the basement? Holy
caused blame
shit.
for the disappearance to be shifted onto his mother, though she had unfortunately passed away 20 years prior. So there's no way of confirming if she was responsible or not, and therefore what really happened will forever be unknown.
Damn.
In January of 2016, an appliance repairman was responding to a call from house owner Charles Price. Though, while the repairman was working in the basement, he would claim to have noticed something moving in a covered container in a back corner. Curious, the repairman would lift off the cover and be met by a 200-pound alligator.
Oh, shit.
But before running, the repairman would capture multiple pictures for proof to show the police. It turns out the house owner had the alligator for more than 20 years and was supposedly using it to help him with the house's mouse infestation. He would illegally keep the creature in a cage in his basement and claimed to occasionally take him out into his backyard. Shortly after the repairman made the report, the alligator was confiscated by local animal control and later released into a better environment.
That shit would be fucking crazy, bro. Oh, man.
This
Holy
discovery was
shit.
posted to
That'd be
Reddit by an account under the name
trying to do your
Daily
job
Dish.
and you met
In
with
the
that.
post, the Redditor explains how a
Man.
few years ago they shared a house with some friends, and in the first few months of living in the house, they hadn't spent much time in the basement. The basement was half finished, with the other half being a sort of dirt crawl space that extended under the porch of the house. They went on to explain how one night they decided to explore it more thoroughly, and after grabbing a flashlight, they discovered a black canvas duffel bag in the very back of the dirt crawl space. Disturbingly, in the duffel bag were 2 black ski masks, a hunting knife, and a single black leather glove. The Redditor went on to explain how they decided to call the non-emergency police number and report the discovery, though the police weren't interested, and therefore the house owners decided to set fire to everything but the hunting knife. Whether that bag had any relation to any sort of criminal activity is still unknown to this day.
Damn. Well, shit, fuck it. If cops don't care,
This
I don't
next
care.
discovery comes from a guy who moved into a studio apartment in England. The guy claimed to have moved into the apartment without even viewing the place, and on arrival he would discover something pretty disturbing.
So here's the apartment I moved into last week. It's pretty small, pretty nice. Rent was pretty cheap, so I moved in without even viewing the place. And then when I got here, I realized why the rent was so cheap.
Yeah, because it
The
ain't
guy
shit
then goes on
it.
to give a tour of the apartment, and after a while, this sort of trapdoor on the floor can be seen.
Got a bathroom, pretty standard. And then we look down here. What's this? That's definitely a handle. So I figured, you know, a bit of underfloor storage. So let's lift this up.
Fuck.
That looks like it goes down pretty deep.
Featured directly under this guy's apartment is some sort of dungeon-looking basement.
Walking in the steps into a dungeon.
What the fuck?
Come down. We can see a corridor going off straight to the front. Some interesting graffiti on the wall. Down here, this place is strange. There's like a
What the fuck is this?
brick seat or bed.
It's like a
Compared
fucking
to the rest of the
prison
apartment,
under
the
your
area
house,
itself is
bro?
pretty big, featuring many large rooms and corridors. What exactly this area was used for is unclear.
You start a whole smuggling ring in that motherfucker.
Way back in
I guess.
2002, a homeowner in Jefferson County, Wisconsin, found out that the foundation of her house was deteriorating. And so in November, she would apply for a loan to repair the foundation. But around 2 weeks later, while away at work, she would get a call from the workers hired to do the repair, explaining how they came across a gruesome discovery. They explained that as they started to remove the soil from the foundation wall in her basement, they had unearthed the full skeletal remains of a body.
Oh
The
shit.
skeleton was determined to be that of a 50-year-old male. Most disturbingly, though, is the fact that after further inspection, it was determined that the house had been built right on top of an ancient burial ground that's estimated to be up to 170 years old.
Man, see, that's
Experts
the problem
believe
with these
that in
builders.
all
They
likelihood,
keep
hundreds more
building this
skeletons are
shit.
within a close proximity to the one found. This discovery would ultimately put a stop to the house's renovation altogether.
Right. 'Cause now they gotta tear that shit down.
In January of 2010, Wally and Linda DeForest would move into their new home in Goshen, Indiana. Though only a week after moving in, the couple would discover a live torpedo in their basement, something they obviously weren't aware of beforehand. Both of them noted how old the thing looked, but still obviously active. There had been no drill holes to indicate it had been disarmed. The couple would end up calling the police, who would send out a bomb squad to extract the torpedo from the property's basement. And luckily they were able to remove it without incident. But considering the squad did confirm the explosive was still active upon arrival, the whole situation just makes you think how much worse things could have really gone.
Man, what if someone would have just dropped it? You never know. Anyways, man, shout out to y'all for rocking with your boy. I know that we didn't necessarily actually start late. We actually started at a good time today. Yeah, we actually did. I was about to say we started late, but it's actually only, I think, 12 on the East Coast right now, 12:20. And usually we like just kind of getting started halfway through it or something by this point. So yeah, shout out to you guys, man. I appreciate everybody rocking with your boy. Yeah, become a member. You know what I'm saying? If you guys want to wait for the $2.99 option, you know what I'm saying? Big ups to you. Do what you got to do, player. You know what I'm saying? And play it because I appreciate it. And yeah. do what you, yeah, just have a good fucking night and a great week. I know it's about to be Monday tomorrow, so go ahead and wake up and be like, damn, it's Monday. We get to have a good day because it's about to be a fun day. You know what I'm saying? Because it's Monday. You dig? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you gotta just bring the weekend or the weekend on a good note. And you gotta be the good note. You dig what I'm saying? And yeah, all right, man. I'll catch y'all later. I'm high, and that's just what it is. Love y'all. Peace. Oh, did it not? Oh, it did.